A comment from viewer Caliber Crusader hit different last month. He wrote that he bought a radium dial Longines at an estate sale and customs never blinked. He is absolutely right to be surprised. These dials are radioactive. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission knows they are out there. The Environmental Protection Agency has rules specifically written to contain them. And yet, a grandfather clause so narrow and so legally load-bearing that regulators cannot rewrite it without collapsing private property law itself is keeping these watches alive and on wrists today. Today, we are exposing the radiation dial loophole and why the government is desperate to bury it before more people find out. To understand why this loophole exists, you have to go back to the factories. Between 1917 and 1955, thousands of American workers, mostly women, painted luminous radium onto watch dials, instrument panels, and military field equipment. The radium girls mixed the paint with their lips, tipping their brushes to a point with their tongues before pressing them against the dial surface. They glowed in the dark walking home from their shifts. They died in agony from bone cancer, jaw necrosis, and radiation poisoning that ate through their skeletons from the inside. By the time the lawsuit settled and the science was undeniable, the federal government had seen enough. The regulatory response was not subtle. The Atomic Energy Act of 1954 handed the newly created Atomic Energy Commission sweeping authority over radioactive materials in commerce. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which absorbed those powers in 1975, built a licensing framework around any object emitting ionizing radiation above established thresholds. Radium-226, the isotope painted onto those dial faces, has a half-life of 1,600 years. It does not fade. It does not neutralize. Every radium dial watch ever made is still radioactive, sitting in someone's drawer or on someone's wrist, emitting the same alpha particles it emitted the day it left the factory in 1943. The import rules followed from there. Bringing a radium dial timepiece across a United States border today triggers NRC jurisdiction immediately. Customs agents are authorized to flag, hold, and confiscate radioactive objects at the point of entry without warning. The EPA guidelines for radium disposal classify these items as low-level radioactive waste, requiring licensed handling and documented containment. State health boards in California, New York, and Massachusetts have built their own overlapping frameworks that make resale legally complicated, ownership publicly discouraged, and disposal a bureaucratic ordeal, expensive enough to stop most collectors before they even start. On paper, the system is airtight. These watches should be extinct in private American hands. The government built every wall it needed to make that happen. Except for one thing they could not touch: the Nuclear Regulatory Commission licensing framework, the Environmental Protection Agency waste classifications, and every state-level resale restriction all share the same structural flaw. They were written to govern new production, new imports, and new commercial transactions involving radioactive materials. They were not written and cannot be retroactively applied to objects already in private hands before the regulatory framework existed. A radium dial watch purchased through a private estate today is not a new radioactive hazard entering commerce. It is private property changing hands. Private property law, as it stood before 1954, is a wall that federal regulators cannot legally demolish without consequences that reach far beyond any watch collection. This is the loophole, not a technicality, not an oversight waiting to be patched at the next session. It is a direct collision between two immovable legal structures, and neither can fully override the other. So collectors are moving. They are buying Rolex reference 6036 chronographs with original radium chapter rings through closed-lot auction houses in New York and Geneva. They are acquiring Vulcan cricket alarm watches from the 1940s, the exact models carried on the wrists of sitting American presidents, with glowing radium indices fully intact. They are sourcing Longines 13ZN movements in original cases, the same caliber that accompanied Allied military officers through the Second World War, complete with the warm greenish luminescence that made them invaluable in total darkness. They are hunting Elgin and Belova military field watches from the Korean War era, dial surfaces painted with enough radium to remain legible for generations without a battery, a circuit, or line of code. They are tracing Hamilton-Guillaume watches through private estate lots and closed inheritance auctions across 17 states. The government cannot recall a single one of them, not without dismantling property protections that predate the atomic age itself. And that is a fight no regulatory agency has ever been willing to start. As viewer Radium Relic WI pointed out in the comments, a skilled watchmaker servicing a radium dial movement does not need a software subscription, a dealer authorization code, or a proprietary scan tool to do it correctly. He needs a loop, a set of Swiss screwdrivers, and 60 years of mechanical logic encoded directly into the physical geometry of the lever escapement in front of him. If a mainspring snaps inside a Longines 13ZN in the middle of nowhere, you source a replacement from any competent Swiss parts supplier for under $40, set it by hand, and drive home running. Try doing that with a module the manufacturer discontinued in 2019. That level of analog independence is exactly what the agencies now lining up to close this gap cannot accept. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission has been quietly lobbying Congress for expanded jurisdiction over pre-1954 radioactive consumer goods since 2018. The Environmental Protection Agency's Office of Radiation and Indoor Air published internal guidance in 2021 identifying estate sale transfers of radium dial objects as a regulatory blind spot requiring legislative remedy. In California and Illinois, state health department officials have already begun flagging antique dealers who openly advertise radium dial inventory, issuing informal compliance notices that carry no legal authority today, but signal with precision exactly where enforcement is heading tomorrow. And the trap can close fast when regulators decide to move. A collector in Connecticut had his 1943 Elgin military field watch, estate purchased and documented in the same family since the war, flagged at a regional hazardous materials checkpoint during a routine storage unit inspection in 2022. The watch was not illegal. It had never crossed a modern border. It had changed hands exactly once in 80 years. None of that mattered during the 12 weeks it spent in regulatory limbo while attorneys argued over whether NRC informal administrative guidance could override state property statutes. He recovered it. The legal bill was $4,000. The watch was worth $900. To survive this regulatory advance, collectors are using every gap the agencies cannot yet legally close. They complete private transfers using estate documentation from before 1954, establishing continuous ownership that predates the Atomic Energy Act. They route acquisitions through closed lot auction houses in states without active radium inventory ordinances. They register collections under antique personal property statutes that predate modern radiation governance by decades. The government knows every one of these routes. What it cannot do is close them without rewriting private property law in ways that touch every pre-regulatory object in American hands, and no agency has the political mandate to attempt that. So here is the question every collector already knows the answer to. If a federal agency can argue that a watch your grandfather carried through the Second World War becomes a regulatory liability the moment it changes hands, did you ever truly own it? You did not. You bought a very expensive object the government can reclassify and seize the moment its guidance catches up to its ambitions. These movements do not lie. They cannot be updated. They cannot be remotely deactivated. A radium dial from 1943 ticks today with exactly the same mechanical truth it carried 80 years ago. Immune to over-the-air mandates, immune to software obsolescence, immune to the quiet digital control the modern collector market is already accepting as a reasonable price to pay for convenience. The luminescence fused into that dial is a physical record no regulatory body can rewrite, revise, or brick with a firmware push. We are not hoarders. We are the custodians of objects that outlived every institutional system ever built to contain them. Every tick is an act of ownership the government cannot reverse. Have you ever owned a radium dial watch? What state are you in, and have regulators ever questioned your right to keep it? Sound off in the comments right below, because your experience is the documentation the rest of us need to build a complete picture of exactly how far this enforcement is already reaching. If you refuse to let a federal agency decide what history you are legally allowed to own, hit the subscribe button and join the record. Keep your movements wound. Keep your dials original. Keep your cases closed. We will see you in the next one.